of the paraduma on those skins. And that was the Gemara's question yesterday. And that was Rabbi Loza was the one who had that question. And the Gemara explained that that question was dependent on what was the tachash in the Mishkan. Was the tachash in the Mishkan from a kosher animal, or the tachash in the Mishkan was a not kosher animal? And then we had Rabbi Yosef that went on record that, he said we have a braita that says that what was used from Lecha Shemayim was only from a kosher animals, and therefore, only thing that will be subject to this process would be or the animal of the skin of a kosher animal. With that being said, comes Rava, and Rava disagrees, and Rava says, or behemoth tmeya, the metame be'ol hamet mihacha. He says we have a special teaching, meaning to say even if the tachash skin in the Mishkan was made from a skin of a kosher animal, but nevertheless, we have a special pasuk that tells us that skin from a even not kosher animal will be subject to the laws of contamination. Nathan, you able to hear me? Okay. So the Gemara says, yes. Very good. So the Gemara says, Rava argues. He says he has a special source that tells us that the skin of a non-kosher animal will be subject to contamination as a tent. What's his source? The Tanya, he wants to learn out from Sarat. He wants to learn out, we have something called morning to see a soul. We have the Gemaras are over there. If you want a Gemara, what's up to you, however you want to. The Gemara, the Torah has one of the 13 ways the Torah is expounded is by a mamatzino, that, binyan av. That if the Torah says a halacha by one case, so you'd say that that's a precedent, and that teaches us all other cases as well. All the things that are comparable, that are similar. And therefore, Saul, we are bringing a source. Rava says that if there's a dead body in a tent, the tent itself, Torah says you have to go ahead and do the process of purification on the tent. The ashes of the paraduma. But the question the Gemara had was, what about if the tent materials made from non-kosher animal skin? Would that also be subject to this law? And the Gemara says, because we find, till now, the Gemara said that the word ohel by the dead body. There was ohel by the Mishkan. So whatever was called ohel by the Mishkan, one assignment is called the ohel by the mate. So, and the Gemara was, we had skins by the Mishkan. They had the tachash skin. There were certain skins on top of the covering the Mishkan. And the Gemara wanted to say, let's look at those tachash skins and see, are they from a kosher animal, not kosher animal? And now the Gemara says, Rava says, you know what? Independent whether that tachash skin was kosher or not, but we have a special teaching that skins from a non-kosher animal will be subject to this contamination process. That would receive contamination, and you have to go ahead and go through the purification process. So what's his source? So Rava says we are now on 28A2. 28A2, the bottom of the first column. No, sorry, 28A3, bottom of the first column. Rava Amar. So he says, I have a braita, right? Okay, you got 28A3, first column, bottom. The time you have a braita. The braita is talking about a garment that has a discoloring. Garment that has a discoloring, certain colors that are considered leprosy colors, certain spots, certain types of spots. And the pasuk says, a garment ki bo negatzarat Bebeged semer, it says a garment that's wool, or bebeged pishtin, a garment that's linen, or bishati, or in the warp threads, or the erev in the woof threads, the threads that go this way and threads that go that way. When you prepared those threads for the purpose of weaving. You didn't weave them; they're not woven together yet. La pishtim or letzema, or those threads are from the linen family or the wool family, and then it says o ba'ar, and the pasuk says o ba'ar. It could have said it says It says, oh, it could have said OR. The pasuk could have said, or leather. What's OBR? So the Gemara says the extra bed is Reba. It's coming to go ahead and and include and add or behemoth meya. It's coming to include the skin of a non-kosher animal, that the skin of a non-kosher animal is subject that has leprosy, that it's tummy. So meaning not only mean this whole concept of leprosy is a novel idea, that there's such thing called a tumah, a contamination of leprosy that goes through certain process, and being that's the case, um, the fact the Torah says that leather is subject to this law does not necessarily, maybe it's only kosher, leather from a kosher animal. How do you know leather from a not kosher animal? So this extra bed is coming to add even from a not kosher animal. The Gemara says also, v'chein lo sheloka biyad kohen. Let's say that you brought the garment to the kohen, and while it was by the kohen, it came to the scullery. So that's also considered, also subject to the laws of contamination. And the writer continues, Katsas bekulam. If what happened, if someone goes ahead and he cut from all the different types of materials, and he went ahead and let's say the pasuk talks about wool having leprosy in a woolen garment, leprosy in a linen garment, or leprosy in leather. But what happens if it was not a leather garment or wool garment or a leather garment? It was a mix, a cholent. You mix together, you cut some wool, and you cut some leather, and you cut some linen, and you made from all of them one garment. So how do we know that it also would be subject um, to this law? So the Gemara says, Talmud Loma O b'malachas ar. It says in the pasuk O b'malachas ar, and from this word O b'malachas ar, that there's no difference between the skin of a kosher animal, the skin of a not kosher animal, and the Gemara says, meaning from this, and the Gemara says from here we're going to see from this pasuk that the whole malachas are any type of leather, type of, even if it's not fully leather, it is mixed with um, other items. It would be subject to this law. Let me take a look for a second at see the commentary. Okay, so the Gemara wants to say, so from this we're going to learn out the same way that we include a non-kosher animal, right? We have established that by leprosy, if it's from a non-kosher animal, the skin and there's this coloring on it will be subject to the laws of contamination. So the Gemara says the same way that, good morning, Emmanuel, the same way we find by leprosy that if it's from a non-kosher animal, the skin is subject to leprosy. So too, if the tent is made from a non-kosher animal, it also will be subject to the laws of contamination by a mate. So is that clear or not? Okay, let's understand. We have the Gemara is comparing a precedent we've established a precedent. What we have established that when it comes to contamination by leprosy, there's no difference between a kosher animal leather or not kosher animal's leather. So the Gemara is thinking the same way, and the Torah tells us that it writes it's able extra word, extra letter, whatever the limud is, the Gemara learns it from. We find there is no uh, difference between kosher leather and not kosher leather. Morning, Nathan. So now the question is the same way. So the Gemara is thinking, Rav is saying, the same way there's no difference when it comes to leprosy between kosher leather and not kosher leather. The laws of contamination apply equally. So the Gemara says so too. We should say that's a mamatzina. We found there's no difference by leprosy. There should be no difference by the ohel hamet. The ohel hamet that we've already established that skins are called an ohel. We established it from the Mishkan. The Mishkan is called ohel, and Adam ki yamut ba'ohel. And we established that the third layer, the top layer of the tachash skin is made from, and the orad ilima, the mim, the skins from the ram and the skins from the tachash are connected to the ohel, are compared to the ohel. And therefore we have established, once we've already established that skins have subject to the contamination of an ohel, so, and they have to go through, if they serve as a canopy, they have to go through the process. So therefore, we should say the same way by sarat, the same way by leprosy. There was no difference between whether it's kosher skins and not kosher skins. So too, the Gemara wants to say there should be no difference from by the case of mate. So now the only thing was, if you could tell me that there's some reason that there should be a stringency by leprosy over mate, then maybe it's not a good comparison, right? You can only say I have a precedent, I want to apply that precedent to this case, is only if the cases are comparable. That's what the Gemara shoots back. Equal and different, the Gemara says, but you could ask. Malin Goyim, by leprosy, we have something very strict. The Torah, as Rabbi David Feinstein would say, threw the book at you. So the Torah was very strict. What was the strict? She came shati ve'erev. The shati strings, the shati threads, the threads that we call the warp threads, and the erev and the woof threads. Those threads are threads that you prepared for the weaving of the garment, right? You made these threads that are going to be the threads that go across the garment and the threads that go sideways the garment. Let's say you have it on a spool, right? Is that what you call it? Loom. A loom. But you're ready. Right. And let's say you have it on a stick. You put these threads on a stick. You have the warp threads that are on a stick, the woof threads that are on a stick, two different sticks. And now those threads, you did not, and then there was a discoloring in the threads itself. So what the halacha is, when it comes to leprosy, those they will be subject to the laws of leprosy. Just like if you would have a discoloring on a garment, an actual garment that was woven, it's subject to that's where the laws of leprosy apply. So to these threads. But that is a very big stringency that we find by leprosy. But the tumat mate by a person an item becoming in contact with a garment, coming in contact with a dead body, It's only if the garment is woven. If the garment is not woven, it will not be subject to the laws of contamination. So we find by leprosy, there's a stringency that's not found by a corpse, by a dead body. So therefore, you can't compare, you can't learn the fact that the Torah was also strict by leprosy, by a not kosher leather. You can't say, therefore, that stringency will apply to the dead body case, because the dead body case is not as strong. Because when it comes to mate, we'll call it tomat mate. The contamination of dead body does not have that strength. We find is not as strong as leprosy. Therefore, you can't learn out the fact that leprosy, the Torah was strict by leather, kosher and not kosher. It should apply to tomat mate. So the Gemara says, okay. Reuven says, I have a different. I will have a different source. Ela goma mishratzim. Well, let's learn from shratzim. The 8 teeming animals. Let's say a mouse. I think they identify as one of the shratzim. When they're dead, if those creeping animals are dead and they come in contact with leather, right, or garments or other things, they contaminate them. So the Tanya, we have a Braita. The Braita says that if kol yipol kol davar sheyipol alav mehem, if any item, if the shvatzim, if those dead teeming animals fell on items bimotam, when these teeming animals are dead, yitma, those items will become contaminated. And the Torah then specifies what items. Mikol kli'etz, a wooden utensil, or beged, or a garment, or see here that doesn't say bi'or, right? Or leather. And now the pasuk identifies or as skins, as leather, as one of the things that receive contamination from the sheretz, from these teeming animals. So the word or ein li ela or behemoth tahorah. The word or, we only know the chidush. The basic chidush is from a kosher. We're now on 28a4. We are 28.4 towards the top. Ainly elo or behemoth Torah. You only know the given is from a kosher animal. How do we know? Or behemoth meya minayin. How do we know that if the sheretz, if the creeping animal, if it came in contact with a skin from a non-kosher animal, how do we know it's all subject to contamination? So the Gemara says, Tamaloma O-R, the extra O. So the extra O tells us, look, it could have said, most probably could have said Vi'or. It could have said, plus says, right. Right there, the Gemara said the bet was extra. Here, the Gemara is learning that the O is extra. It could have said, most probably could have said Vi'or, or Beged, V'or. Most probably didn't have to say the word O. But the fact that it says the word O is coming to tell us another type of skin. It's adding on, in addition to the R, in addition to the regular kosher leather, even not kosher leather is subject to the rule. But
what is he taking his coffee, Mr. Hammond?
What is he taking? What?
Regular,
doesn't take just milk. So the Gemara says that we have this extra teaching when it comes to sheretz, and this extra O teaches us that the leather, when it comes to sheretz, when it comes to shvatzim, there's no difference between the leather, whether it's kosher leather, not kosher leather, is subject to the rules of tumat sheretz, the contamination from this dead creeping animal. So too, the Gemara says there's no difference when the Torah has this law of tumat mate, that the tent will be subject to contamination. The canopy itself, there's no difference whether it's kosher leather or not kosher leather. Okay, so that's what the Gemara is now. The Gemara has moved away from we can't prove from leprosy, because leprosy maybe has astringency that tumat meat doesn't have, but let's learn from sheretz. Okay, that's the Gemara. Simon, is it clear? That's what the Gemara is saying. So the Gemara says also, you can't learn out from leprosy, from sheretz, from the teeming animals, because there's something also over there that's more strict than by a dead by a olam mate, by a dead body. What's the reason? What is that? Malashrotzim, when it comes to sheretz, she came mitamin v'kadosha. If you have a adasha, a lentil, the size of a lentil of a sheretz, of this, let's say this dead mouse.
Lentil is the size of a mouse.
If you have a piece of a mouse, let me clarify. Piece of a mouse, that's the size of a lentil. Yes, that's what I meant to say. If you have a lentil, a piece of a mouse, okay, you have that saw, they cut off a piece of the mouse, a dead mouse was cut, or whatever it was, and that piece of the dead mouse came in contact with the garment or the leather. How much of the mouse, of the short sim, what's the size of a sheretz to have to contaminate? It has to have a certain size. So the size is the size of a lentil. A lentil is probably much less than a pruta. It's a certain type of bean. It's a certain type of bean.
It makes sense on itself. First of all, aren't sharks eating bugs? Am I crazy?
Yeah, we call them bugs, but that's not the bug. Those shorts that we call.
They like bugs.
Right.
Like swarm. Bricks. The bug. Swarm. Swarm.
Wow.
Yeah.
But
Bugs, insects.
right, but that's true. But bugs are called shortzim, but that's not the shortzim that the Torah says has the power to contaminate a person. Right, they don't have that power to contaminate a person or contaminate a garment. They specifically ate shortzim.
Besides mouse and rats, what are the other six?
We could take a look at the plus. I think there's a lot of questions exactly how to identify them. Maybe what is the meaning of the hymn? We'll take a look at that.
Very lizard.
There's no question how to identify these short things. Right, but these sheret, that's why the ant, the cockroach, the water bug didn't make it to the list. All right, so here is the listing. I mean, Simon knows it by heart. Very impressive, Simon. Okay, the Torah says, Hacholed, Ha'akba, Hatzav. So what are these things? A whole lot of people thought like a weasel, like a hulda. They translate a lot as a weasel. So in the art scroll, what are they going to do with the translation? They don't even want to translate them. So they translate it into the Hebrew. Choled Akbar. And then on the bottom, they're going to probably try to identify what they are. So, according to Rashi and others, this is a weasel. Rav Sadik translated a choled as a mole. The Akbar, generally this is a mouse, may include other rodents as well, such as a rat. Hatzav, Rashi says the animal resembles a frog. Thus, presumably it's a toad. Anaka, the hedgehog or porcupine. According to Rashi. According to the Radak, it's a viper. The koach, according to Rav Sadik, is a species of lizard, like Simon mentioned, lizard. And Simon says. Halto, Rashi translated Halto as the lizard. So there's a question, which one is the lizard? Some say this one's the lizard, that one's the lizard.
They're different, Hurda is also like a lizard. Like they have different families. Different, but they all crawl on four and they have long tail.
Interesting. Like a mouse has that tail, had that, right?
Yeah.
Right.
It's crazy because it's like if you had piece of a mouse the size of a lentil, you would never know that it's a piece of like, you know, if it was just the flesh, maybe like a cat was eating something and it ripped a little bit of, I have no idea.
Right, you're saying, but man, obviously it's talking about so people are able to figure it out.
How would you know it's a piece of a rat?
Just,
Oh,
If you saw the skin and the hair, maybe, and the color.
Could be like could be the tip of his tail.
and the chomet, Rashi translates the snail. He has as a snail. And okay, so these are some. Now you get a little picture of what these are, specifically these. None of these are cockroaches or water bugs or ants or you know what I'm saying? You hear what I'm saying? So those will not. They're not shvatzim. They will not be able. They don't have the power to contaminate upon their death. But these have the power to contaminate. That answers your question. You want to know what they were. Thank you for asking the question. So, also interesting, this week's Parsha, we're going to have the 24 birds. And also a lot of the birds, the 24 families of birds in Parsha Shir'eh, similarly Parsha Shemini, where it identifies the 24 birds that we can't eat.
It's the same 24 dogs.
It's the same 24. Maybe there's one of them is called Ra'ah, one's called Da'ah, whatever. But it's basically the same. There's 24. Maybe it might mention them a little, call it a different name or something, whatever. But there's 24 birds. But it's not just 24 birds. 24 families of birds. But what's interesting that are not kosher. The Torah identifies 24 not kosher birds. All of the birds are kosher, besides the 24 families of birds.
What is Asdiya?
Okay, so
what kind of bird is
okay, so I guess you so let's see how they'll translate it.
Those are 24 by article.
No.
It's very impressive, Simon. So here, and also by the way, interesting. One of the eight shvatzim is Tishemed. Tishemed is also one of the birds. It's not the same thing. That they point out, it's not the same thing. That's the same word. It's interesting. So you want to know about the Azniyah, right? Okay, Azniyah is early on in the counting. The Neshe Peretz and Azniyah is the first pasuk that counts them. So let's see. So Ashko again translate Azniyah as Azniyah, right? They don't want to give you a translation to the word. So on the bottom, they say, what is this Azniyah? Azniyah, this is Perik, right? Pasuk Yud Beit. Almost probably they're going to take you. Most probably that they're relying that you're going to go back to Pasha Shmini, maybe on their translation of Shmini, and identifying what there's there. There's a famous Musar idea. One of the birds is called a Hasidah bird. And why is it called something they translate maybe as a storch, right? What's it called? A stork. And the question is why is it called a Hasidah? Because it does chesed with its friends.
But not with not.
That's right. But that's it. So the commentaries want to say it does chesed, so why should be not a kosher bird? So one answer is it does the chesed specifically to its friends, like Nathan says, and not to non-friends. And that's not something that's kosher. Okay. You wanted to know the Azniyah. The Azniyah, here we go. If an Ezra understands Azniyah, understands of Sadiq translation as the mythological griffin, but rejects it because the Torah could not be speaking of a non-existent creature. However, a Kapach notes that the Arabic word used by the Gaon also refers to an actual bird. And Sir Hoffman translated as the white-tailed or sea eagle. Okay, that's the Azniyah. Okay, and okay, so let's continue in the Gemara. So the Gemara says, let's learn out from Shvatzim. We find by Shvatzim we find this phenomenon that whether it's kosher skin, not kosher skin, the sherets, the lizards, the mouse, or whatever, they have the ability upon their death to contaminate all types of leather. No, it's the same way there's no difference between kosher leather and not kosher leather when it comes to sherets. We should say the same thing. There's no difference between kosher leather and not kosher leather when it comes to the tent of a dead body. So the Gemara says, no, you can't compare. I mean, shvatzim, why? Because Mala shvatzim she came in Tamad Dasha. The size of a mouse, as we said, or a lizard, a piece of the lizard, if you have if someone cut a piece of the skin that's even the size of a lentil, it has the power to contaminate by a sherets, by these teeming animals. In contrast to a dead body, you need to have the size of a kazayit. It has to be the size of an olive size. So the same way the Torah was strict by sherets, that even such a small size has the ability to contaminate, you can't learn out that the tumat made, where the Torah was not as strict in certain areas when it by a dead body. Of course, it was strict in other areas by tumat made, right? A meat comes in contact with a person contaminated for 7 days. If a mouse comes in contact with somebody, that dead mouse is contaminated for 1 day. So yes, there's many more stringent. On the one hand, a dead tumat meat is the highest level of contamination, 7 days, ishes of paraduma. But but there is an aspect that the Torah was stronger by a sheret, by these teeming animals, more than a tumat meat, and therefore you can't learn out. It's not comparable. You can't learn out the fact that the Torah was very strict by sherets, that this mouse, that a mouse, if it comes in contact with leather, it doesn't make a difference whether it's kosher leather or not kosher leather. Both would be contaminated, either kosher or not kosher. And you want to say, therefore, it's the same by tumat made, by the case of the corpse in the tent. It's not comparable because we find the Torah was stricter in one halacha by sherets. How was the Torah stricter? Good morning. The Torah says that even the size of a lentil, little bean, we know about that dashim by Yaakov and Esav. What did Yaakov give Esav? Dashim. And I wonder if there is a connection between the measurement. I presume there is a connection. We have to think about it. The measurement of a sheret, the size of a creeping, teeming animal that has the ability to contaminate, that it's the size of a lentil, and any connection to the lentils that Yaakov Avinu gave to, like that. So you have to think about the connection Yaakov gave to Esav. But meaning something to think about. Just a derech musar a little bit. What was the story with Esav? Esav was willing to give up Bechor, the privilege of being the firstborn. Being the firstborn, and being the firstborn came with it. You're going to be the one who does the avodah in the Beit Hamikdash, right? What came along with being the firstborn? Until they sinned by the golden calf, what happened? Who was supposed to be the Kohen? The Bechorim, the firstborns. Once they sinned by the golden calf, they lost that privilege to be the ones to be the Kohanim. That's when the Leviim took over, so to speak. Now, being that's the case, Sa'adashim by Esav, he was willing to throw away everything. He was the firstborn. He was supposed to be not Yaakov. But he threw it away for what? Lentils. For a bowl of lentils. So the lentils, when you think about lentils, it represents something that's connected with contamination. What do you mean contamination? Sin, or call it contamination. Willing to give up, so to speak. He's contaminating himself, so to speak, giving up the opportunity to be the religious leader in the Jewish community, and just to give it all up because he just wants to. He's looking for his own for the momentary gratification, right? Morning, Mr. Haber. The momentary gratification that he had of having that soup. So maybe perhaps the Torah wants us, connect, we're going to use lentils in the future that represents contamination too. And maybe you should think about the story of the lentils of Yaakov and say, I'm not going to be that type of person. It's a little bit of Esav, and I'm not going to be like that Esav. Just a little drush, a little bit. So that's what the Gemara says. Tomorrow we'll continue more on this subject. Thank you all for joining us. Mr. Haber, we mentioned about Esav was willing just for lentils to give it all up. And therefore, I was suggesting that maybe why lentils deserve to be connected with contamination. Because lentils...
Symbolic of death with the
Right. Okay, have a great day.